I work in the further education skills sector, which is post-16 education predominantly, and that covers apprenticeships and all sorts of different vocational courses, plus academic courses. Excuse me, academic courses as well. And what I do is I work in the quality improvement side of things within the further education skills and skills sector. Mainly looking at how colleges and other providers, mainly in the UK, but on certain occasions, I go overseas too, to see how they can improve the outcomes and the impact of the education on the students, learners, and pupils that they're actually working with.
Okay, so when you do your quality improvement work, is it easy for you to recognize creativity, or are you looking for different things such as how efficient the processes are, how accountable the teachers and the managers are? Is it just as easy to recognize creativity, or do you find challenges in doing that?
I think in terms of actually looking at the quality improvement process, first of all, what you need to have is the starting point, in terms of the education that's actually going on, the teaching and learning that's going on, to make sure that the standard of the teaching and learning is at least meeting kind of minimum standards and looking at best practice. But also, once you've got that in place, I think it's very, very important to look at creativity and to look at innovation, because creativity drives innovation in education. So it's very important then to actually think about how to use that really strong starting point to enable the creativity to actually take place, really. So, once you've got your building blocks in place, you can then start looking at creativity and innovation. So I think that's the kind of standpoint that I come from, really. It's like, you can't build an absolutely fantastic house that's got all sorts of different designs on it, but if it's built on sand.
Okay. So when we talk about best practice, you just mentioned best practice there. So that is often associated with standardization, that everyone's doing very similar things. And with standardization, that seems to be inimical to creativity. Do you think it's possible to have best practice and at the same time encourage creativity?
I think it's, as I said previously, to actually have the best practice in place in terms of standardization, again, that creates your building block. So if you've got that there, at least then you can actually then look at creativity and as I said before, in terms of innovation as well, because the creativity drives the innovation. And I think once you've got that in place, you're then able to, we talk about gifted and talented students, we talk about gifted and talented learners, most able learners, but I think the best way for them to actually be in a position to achieve their own potential or go further, possibly, it's being creative, it's being innovative, but without the standards in place first, you can't really do that, because you need to have some kind of a framework to be able to do that, I believe.
There are arguments suggesting that those who are gifted cannot really be taught. Those who are talented can be taught to improve their skills, but those who are gifted have unique, ways of perceiving that it's not really possible to teach them how to be creative. What is your view on that?
I think in terms of being gifted, being talented, whichever phrase you're actually using, I still think that they can be taught, because it's not. Yes, they will have a certain view on their own direction, their own education, but bringing in different creative experience, I think, can always support that to actually take it even further. Very much so.
Okay. And what are the challenges for teachers in trying to accommodate gifted children in with, a whole class full of children who are not labeled as being gifted? Do you think the labeling is effective, or do you think that the label kind of can undermine how the other students see themselves if they see one person being treated in a special way, and the rest of them not being treated in that special way? Are there some negative impact? Is there some negative impact in doing that?
From my experience, I wouldn't say that the most able learners, students, pupils are actually treated in a special way, as you describe. I think they're treated in a different way to allow for their own gifts and talents to ensure that they're actually challenged and extended in their learning. From my experience, what I've seen is students, learners, pupils of varying levels within a class, within a session, being supported in different ways, but all being treated, with the respect that's actually due to them, to enable them to make the progress of which they're capable. So I think it's very important to actually recognise that.
What do you think is the best way of developing skills such as creativity, in addition to literacy and numeracy, for example?
Okay, I think the first thing is to actually identify what creativity is, what it could be. And thinking about creativity in terms of innovation as well. We talk about innovation quite a lot in the learning and skills sector, and I do equate that quite a lot to creativity. Without the creativity, you don't get that. So I think it's I'm not a one. I want to like some of these different phrases, but certainly thinking outside of the box, thinking outside of the norm, to actually look at how learners and students, pupils can actually be extended, but using their own ideas and using their own creative thought patterns, to actually think about themselves, to kind of self-reflect on how they can take their own ideas and bring those into their own education as well. But also in terms of the creative way that the teachers and tutors can do this too. Obviously within qualifications, etc., we have learning objectives, but those learning objectives can actually be arrived at very creatively. So it's not a case of one size fits all in terms of that education. It's thinking about things from a different perspective, and certainly I would say that creativity and innovation can be very, very, very engaging for learners and for students and pupils.
Yes, indeed, it can be very engaging, and at the same time, it's very difficult to provide tangible outcomes. So when we observe in terms of quality improvement, when we observe lessons, sometimes it's a lot easier to find tangible evidence of, best practice, as it were. But when we are thinking outside the box and it's like we're doing things in a different way to the norm, sometimes the tangible evidence is much harder to produce because it might be more long-term than short-term. So in terms of observing a lesson, we go into a lesson and observe maybe 40 minutes, an hour maximum. Very difficult to find time to observe a lesson for longer than that. Do you think it's possible to find tangible outcomes in such a short period of time?
I think so, but I think a lot of that is down to the experience of the observer, and certainly if we're, I've been. I don't know how many observations I've done over the years. It must be in the thousands. But with each observation you do, you develop your skills further. You develop your understanding, your knowledge further. So it becomes very. It kind of builds the experience. I see different things whenever I observe. Whenever new things all the time. which again adds to my own kind of knowledge base. So I see that as being a very positive thing. So using that experience to actually look at what the potential outcomes could be within a short period of time, within an observation. You can actually through that experience see the potential, should we say, maybe not the actual impact and outcome itself, but you can see the potential for the impact.
Okay, there are researchers who say that in terms of observing an outstanding lesson and a lesson which is really poor, even a layperson would make similar judgments to somebody who's highly experienced like yourself. And so what is it that makes an outstanding lesson for you, which is highly creative? How would you recognize it?
I think it's well, to me, an outstanding lesson is where students, learners, pupils make outstanding progress from their starting point within the lesson, and that can be with or without creativity, to be honest. But I think for it to be really meaningful to the student, the learner, the pupil, I think the creativity element has to come into it, really, because that's the bit which really turns them on, which really engages them in the learning and gets them to think. I can see beyond this. I can see beyond this. I can see how using creativity this could actually extend me further. But it's just to summarise, an outstanding lesson isn't about how it's taught. It's about the impact and the outcomes, in terms of the progress and the skill development, and the reinforcement of the knowledge, etc., to an outstanding level in terms of the impact and progress.
Okay, and Jonny, what I've also noticed is that although people like yourself, educators who are very experienced, who take education very seriously, we tend to not disagree about the fact that creativity is important, but perhaps it's in terms of how we define creativity, because some people seem to think that creativity is related to the arts and media courses, and that in courses, let's say in mathematics, are we looking for creativity in mathematics?
Now, then I would say that mathematics is the most creative subject, because everything we do is influenced by mathematics. Yes, you've got to learn the basics, but once you've learned the basics, it's how you then look at how you apply the basics, and the application of that within mathematics is where the creativity happens, because that's how you get a student to recognise, yes, it is important to me. I can use it. And I can use it in a creative way. For example, if somebody is doing some kind of a project, okay, and they think, oh, I'm not sure whether I need to use mathematics in this, but then it's pointed out to them, oh, but maybe you need to use it here, maybe you need to use it there, and that in itself can actually fuel the creativity, I think. As a person who is a key mathematician, should we say, I would say that creativity is very prevalent within mathematics. In fact, I would say that creativity is prevalent in all subjects.
Excellent example, Jonny. Excellent example. And I think that with this concept of mathematics being very creative, it illustrates what you said earlier, that we need to learn the foundations before we can build the house on a solid foundation. And mathematics is like that, because we need to learn how to count, we need to learn how to add up and subtract, and then once we've learned those basics, then we can use mathematics in a creative way.
Indeed, I would agree with that, definitely.
And it's unusual because not a lot of people wouldn't associate mathematics and creativity. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there's this kind of separation between creativity being associated with arts and the sciences, and mathematics, for example, considered to be very formulaic?
I think it's down to the perception that of mathematics and the way it's been promoted over decades. Well, longer than decades. I'm talking about centuries, to be honest. It's been seen as a thing that we have to do. We have to be able to count. We have to be able to to get by in life. But then if you look at a lot of the different mathematicians across the years and where the creativity has gone based on what what their own research. For example, if you think about someone like Professor Stephen Hawking and the work that he's done, he was a very much mathematician and very, very, very creative. And in terms of bringing people into things like looking into dark matter, looking into black holes and things. That's all mathematics based. Okay, it's all very science based, but it's also something that a lot of people probably can't get their heads around. And the creativity within that is how you then explain it to people, to the lay person. So I think it's very, very, very deep rooted within mathematics creativity. If you go back, centuries, to the early mathematicians, they were very, very creative people. If you look at Leonardo da Vinci, for example, another great mathematician, but also an incredibly creative person. So.
Yes, Leonardo is an excellent example of a genius who was combining both his mathematical talent and the artwork as well. So do you think that a lot of, through your observations of mathematics being taught as a skill, do you think that teachers are being very creative in the way they teach mathematics? Are they allowing students to be creative with mathematics? Because in my experience, I found that a lot of functional skills, numeracy teaching, students don't want to attend those classes. If they're doing business, they don't want to attend the functional skills numeracy classes. They find them to be very boring. So I was wondering, if that's been your experience as well. Why do students find maths lessons to be so boring?
I think it's about the perception of mathematics, and a lot of young people in particular, and older people is, say, oh, I can't do maths, I'm afraid of maths. There's a big stigma attached to it, really. And I must admit the teaching of mathematics I have seen has not been great. Yes, it is very functional, but it's not something that I would say is very creative. I think there's the opportunity there for creativity to come into it, particularly in trying to infuse and engage students into it. But I don't think that's been done very well, unfortunately. Particularly within the further education sector. If you think about the more academic side of it, the academic side of mathematics again is still very, very kind of formulaic and functional as well. And I don't think the actual creativity comes until you get to the much higher levels within education, which is a real shame. But I think we can use creativity and innovation at the lower levels from entry level to really engage, motivate, and enthuse students. I think that's the way to do it, in the way that the actual maths is taught. I think that's where the creativity make it interesting.
Yes, because perhaps you will agree with me on this, but a lot of students who leave school without a GCSE in maths, even though they're doing functional skills when they get to college, a very large proportion of them fail, which is very sad, because we seem to be kind of wasting students' time. They leave college saying, I hate maths, or I'm not creative, so I'm wondering how we can overcome these obstacles, that that we're not kind of perpetuating this thing of students continually saying, I hate maths, I'm terrible at maths.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is a barrier that we do need to break down, and I think the way to break it down is by the creative way that maths is sold to students and also delivered. So if it's the same old way, for example, if they're going into a classroom and they're sat behind a desk and there's somebody up at the blackboard, no, okay. Delivering the same old things, and they're working through worksheets, and they're not using technology. They're not putting things into context. It's not fun. Then it'll continue in the same way, I would say.
Mm.
Well, in terms of all different subjects, I would say that to be able to be creative and to innovate, you've got to have the building blocks in place first. Because what creativity tends to be is it tends to be more less tangible, should we say, and the boundaries are wider, if there are any boundaries sometimes. So it's harnessing that, and to harness that, you've got to have the framework in place first, and the building blocks in place first.